In December 1944, B-29 serial number 44-69972 rolls off the assembly line at Boeing Wichita's plant and crosses Oliver Street to the military flight line at Wichita's Municipal Airport, and the process of modification and preparation for flight begins. On March 23, 1945, it is delivered to the Army Air Corps to join 8 other aircraft to form a radar training squadron. This squadron becomes known as the Snow White Squadron, with Snow White, the Seven Dwarfs, and the Wicked Witch. B-29 serial number 44-69972 is named Doc. For the next 11 years, Doc trains radar operators, calibrates radar units, and tows targets for aerial gunnery practice. In March of 1956, Doc is flown to China Lake Naval Weapons Center north of Los Angeles. Doc is towed out into the desert, becoming a gunnery target for the Navy, potentially suffering the same fate as many other aircraft flown there had in the past, in 120-degree temperatures, blowing sand, with critters of all kinds, including the desert tortoise, making Doc their new home. 42 years would pass, and Doc remained mostly intact. Tony Mazzolini, a Korean War veteran who served as a flight engineer on a B-25J, C-46, and C-47. He was stationed at Stewart Air Force Base in upstate New York in the early 1950s. Tony remembers seeing the Snow White Squadron stationed at Griffiss Air Force Base in Rome, New York. He recalls seeing Doc for the first time in 1953.
It was a squadron of 9 airplanes. It was Snow White, Seven Dwarfs, and the Wicked Witch. 40-some years later, I just happened to locate Doc in the desert where we could see what was left of the nose art that was on the airplane at the time.
Tony was later transferred to a base in southern Japan as a flight engineer, flying frequent combat cargo flights to Korea on several multi-engine type aircraft during his tour of duty in the Far East.
I still had to fly to Korea every day. I came back in '56.
Tony then left the Air Force. Tony's more than 40-year business career included working for TRW, General Electric Corporation, and Continental Airlines. His involvement with the B-29 came after he became a member of the Confederate Air Force and flew on Fifi. In the last half of the 1980s, Tony pondered the possibility of finding a second B-29 to restore to flight worthiness to complement Fifi. He had heard stories about more than 200 B-29s making their last flights to Aberdeen Proving Ground and China Lake Naval Weapons Center for use as test targets.
Exhausted all my efforts with Aberdeen. They said they had absolutely nothing left. Everything was destroyed.
Tony's early inquiries to the Navy at China Lake were met with replies that would discourage someone with less determination. He was told that all the B-29s were gone.
One of the people that were retired from China Lake met me and said, listen, he says, there is one more left out on one of those ranges. And he eventually sent me a picture of it. I decided that I was going to try to move on that.
Mazzolini finally received permission to visit the range in 1987.
They drove me out to that specific test range, and I could see in the distance the silhouette of this on the horizon of this B-29, and as we got closer, that image got larger and larger, and as we got to that particular location, I even jumped out of the truck before it stopped, just to go over and see it, touch it, climb through it, on it, over it, and under it. It was a real good feeling. And I thought to myself, it's here and I've got to stake a claim on this somehow.
It would take Tony another 11 years before he could lay claim to the B-29 called Doc. The Navy's offer for Doc was straightforward. The historical Naval Aviation Collection in Pensacola, Florida, needed a B-25 Mitchell twin-engine bomber in restored condition. If Tony would furnish that, the Navy would release Doc.
Eventually found out that there was a B-25 that was available in Venezuela. And so I committed to that. I sent the crew down, they dismantled the airplane, put it in a couple of sea containers, put it on a ship, brought it to Florida, then put it on a train, and we got it into Cleveland.
What Mazzolini thought would be a 6-month refurbishment program turned into a 6-year effort. First, Tony lost access to the building in Cleveland, and the bomber had to be shipped to Pennsylvania, where the Air Heritage Museum completed the restoration. The Navy initially requested to have the bomber restored and configured as one of Doolittle's Raiders, changed their mind, and requested that it be finished as a naval PBJ variant. Mazzolini complied.
The Air Heritage Museum did a magnificent job on that restoration.
In 1998, Doc was released intact to Tony, 45 years after he first saw Doc back in New York.
So now we had to worry about how to get it from the base location to the next town's airport. We had to wait for the Navy to do a study with the Fish and Wildlife Department because they had some concerns about the disruption of the desert tortoise habitat at their location. Even though it was a bombing range, it took about 6 months to determine an approved route. We acquired another set of tires, put them on the airplane, and we had some volunteers come out, and I was trying to get a core group together to see how we can restore and get this plane to ferryable condition. The route that we had to take also included a dry riverbed, which I didn't think would be a problem. I thought we could bulldoze it in. They would not allow us to do that because we're not supposed to disrupt the natural terrain of the desert. So a railroad company in Trona, California donated 800 railroad ties, and we had to build 3 bridges to get across this dry riverbed. And it took us 1 whole day to do that, to get it across. We wound up in private property, people's backyards, under power station lines, high tension wires running from Southern California to Northern California. Then finally got it to the on-ramp of 395. And we went up 395 for a while, crossed that freeway, and got onto the next town's airport, which is called Inyokern Airport.
It took 4 days and nearly 40 miles to get to Inyokern Airport with the help of 75 volunteers.
How do you repay anybody or any group like that? I had placed a call to Paul Tibbets, the pilot of the Enola Gay, who was a close friend of mine. I said, Paul, I says, I'd like to have you come out and see this B-29. And so he not only came out, but he brought the remaining crew members of the Enola Gay out, and we had a dinner at the local hotel there that evening.
Tony was able to get permission from the Disney Studios in 1999 to once again use the Doc nose art, based in part on an article written on August the 10th in the Wall Street Journal.
There was a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, and he said, tell me about the nose art. What about this nose art? I says, we have to cover it up now. Disney Studios won't let us use this nose art anymore. He happened to mention that when that article came out, the fact that Disney had denied us the privilege of using this nose art. That was on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I received a call from Disney Studios. It says, go ahead and put the nose art back on. The clock is ticking, and it's running on 2 years, getting into the 2nd year, and we're having difficulties.
Volunteers in adequate numbers with desirable skills were not available, along with Doc's long-term exposure to the elements. Doc had aluminum corrosion requiring repairs beyond what could be accomplished at Inyokern.
We had our share of difficulties there, and I was also running out of finances. and didn't want to borrow any more money. And so I knew somebody at Boeing, and I was expressing my dilemma to them. And they says, you ought to give this guy a call in Wichita by the name of Jeff Turner. And out of desperation, I did that, and I placed a call to Jeff Turner during the day, and I didn't hear back from him throughout the day, and I thought, well, you know, I think I've lost everything now, and I just have to give up on it. But that evening, I received a call from Jeff Turner, and he says, hey, he says, I'm Jeff Turner, how can I help you? He says, Tony, he says, if you can get that airplane here, he says, we'll help you get it back into the air.
Tony called Ben Nattrass, whose worldwide aircraft recovery company had carefully dismantled and trucked dozens of aircraft.
And it took us 6 weeks to dismantle this airplane out in California. We had a benefactor that helped us move this airplane, because trying to get it disassembled and jigs built and everything to accommodate each component, and to get it to Wichita, it took some heavy finances. And there was a gentleman by the name of Terry Finn out of Maryland who contacted me and says, hey, I support what you're doing, and I'm willing to help pay the transportation to get that moved. And there's another guy who wanted to help save the last B-29.
In May of 2000, Doc arrived home to Boeing Wichita, 55 years after it was delivered to the Army Air Corps in 1945.
I was awed by everything. I mean, watching the trailers come in, the signage over the hangar, welcome home Doc. It was quite emotional. It was very emotional. You know, you develop a lump in your throat, and you're saying, hey, it's really going to happen.
Let the restoration begin.